To turn the podium over to Dr. Mike Makovsky of JINSA.
Thank you very much, Link. It's nice to collaborate with you again, and it's nice to be here. Look, I'm going to address the Iranian nuclear deal. I was very glad to hear what Congressman Sherman just said, and I think it's important to emphasize at the beginning that this deal transcends partisanship. It transcends party, it transcends administration, and this should not be a partisan issue in any way. This Iran deal that is before Congress in review, I believe, is the most important issue that these members will vote on in their terms in office. It's certainly one of the most momentous issues, I think, certainly in my lifetime. And this is something that we have to, and for this, we have to focus on the national interest, and it shouldn't become in any way a partisan issue. Let me just deal with the way I see the deal and analyzing it. There are obviously some positives in the deal. It reduces, the Iranians are obligated to reduce some of their, significantly reduce their highly enriched material. They're still able to enrich lower enriched uranium. They have to cut down their centrifuge quantity, which is important for developing highly enriched uranium, which is a key fuel for developing nuclear weapons. Certainly there are certain restrictions on the Iranians in their nuclear program. However, whatever positives there are in the deal are heavily outweighed, I believe, by the negatives. And it's really, and I believe this deal, if it goes through, will be one of great historic blunders by the United States with severe national security interests. I'll differ a little bit with my colleagues. I don't think the issue is the job begins today. This deal is the issue. I don't care about anything else. This is the issue for the next 60 days. We'll deal with the aftermath in the aftermath. But right now, I think it's important for Congress to reject this deal and to override any presidential veto. And let me give you why. The most important element of the deal is very obvious. If Iran does not cheat, and that's a big if, because I think that's in this regime's DNA, but if the regime does not cheat, they will have an extremely robust nuclear program with very few restrictions in 15 years, and they'll be able to develop nuclear weapons before the international community, including the United States, is one, I think, able to detect or certainly anything to do anything about. That's pretty much factual. The President himself said it in an interview in NPR. I encourage you to watch it. It was in April. You could find it online, where he says in year 12, 13, even 15, their breakout time goes to virtually zero. He was right about that. Yet, for whatever reason, the administration and the website, the officials' statements of the administration, their White House website, continue to say this will block every pathway to a bomb. It's just frankly, factually untrue. That is the long-term implication. This regime will have nuclear weapons in 15 years if they don't cheat. In the near term, they will get billions of dollars in stimulus. Secretary of Treasury Jack Lew said yesterday, well, it's really $50 billion, it's not $100 billion. That's just the amount of money that will be unfrozen from the banks. That doesn't include the billions of dollars, whether it's $50 billion they'll get or $100 billion or $140 billion. That doesn't include the amount of money they're going to get from all the exports of oil, the increased exports of oil they're going to get, and all the new trade they're going to be able to do with the world. So this is a tremendous stimulus package. Their GDP is about, let's just say, $330 billion, 350. Imagine, let's say, within the next 12 months, whether it's 6 months or 12 months, they're going to get a stimulus package at a minimum of, well, you could do the math yourself, but it certainly, is it 15%? Is it a lot more? Is it 50%? Depends on how things play out. But that's a tremendous stimulus package. Our GDP is $17 trillion. That'd be like, imagine if we had a $2 trillion stimulus package. What would that do for our economy? Obviously, the Iranian regime is not going to put it all into butter. They're going to put a lot of it into guns, and not just guns within their borders, but in Syria, in Yemen, in Iraq, and so on. I think you could almost call this deal the Islamic Republic Stabilization Act, because this deal will stabilize this regime unquestionably. If you like this regime, then vote for this deal, because you're going to get a lot more of this regime. They're going to have a lot more money to oppress their peoples. Nina said correctly, this regime leads the world in per capita executions. It's actually a tremendous feat because they have a lot of competition. The Chinese are also, I think, number 2, if I believe correctly. But the Iranian regime has managed to be number 1 in executions in the world. Hooray for them. So if you like, and that's just what they do to their own people. We also see what they do in other parts of the region. They're the chief sponsor of terror in the world. As was mentioned before by the ambassador, am I right? They try to assassinate the Saudi ambassador, Cafe Milano, here in Georgetown a few years ago, our own nation's capital. So we're going to give this regime a tremendous amount of money to strengthen themselves. What about strategically for the United States? What does this mean? There's going to be a nuclear contagion. This deal will regionalize the problem. A year from now, if this deal proceeds, we're not just going to be talking about what the Iranians are doing in their nuclear program or what they're not doing, how they're cheating or they're not cheating. We're going to have to look at what the Saudis are doing. And they might be our allies, but I, for one, do not want them to get nuclear weapons. I care about their security. They're an important ally of the United States, but they will feel compelled, as they've kind of indicated, to pursue a nuclear program, either a nuclear program or buy nuclear bombs. And why shouldn't they? Because with this deal, we are saying we no longer will look after their interests or the interests of our traditional Sunni Arab allies or of our Israeli allies. And these countries are going to have to look out for themselves. So I believe this increases the chance of a nuclear contagion and increases the chances of a serious conflict involving nuclear program by the countries, whether by intention or miscalculation. The issue was raised about verification. Secretary Kerry said yesterday that they never talked about any time, anywhere inspections. Well, actually, he himself had talked about that before, or I should say Ben Rhodes, a senior White House official, talked about that. That is not in this deal. There's no anytime, anywhere inspections. We will not have the international inspectors will not have access to all sites that they wish, or if they wish to, it has to go through a managed process. So I believe it will be very difficult to verify this deal. Another issue, I would say, is what it doesn't do. Ballistic missiles, restrictions. There's been reports that in 8 years there'll be restrictions lifted on their ballistic missile program. Actually, I just wrote an article today, it's in the Weekly Standard, on this issue. It actually does not say that. You have to go to a UN Security Council resolution that was passed on Monday unanimously and go to page 99, where it talks about not the Iranians, an obligation for the Iranians to curb their ballistic missile program for a number of years, but basically called upon to do so. In essence, they will continue their development of their ballistic missile program. What does that mean? That means that they're going to be able to have the ability to fire nuclear weapons in the eastern seaboard of the United States, here in Washington, New York, Boston, and so on. There's no reason why they're going to have a ballistic missile program except to put nuclear bombs on that. I find of this deal, among all its bewildering elements, and there are many, this is the one that frankly confuses me the most. Why do we not insist on having restrictions enforced on their ballistic missile program, which is the most direct way for the Iranians to deliver nuclear weapons to us. I frankly cannot understand that, and I think for that reason alone, you have to oppose the deal. Let me just conclude that the administration talks about alternatives, and they say the alternative is war. And I believe that the alternative is not war necessarily. I think that if we re-leverage, we impose all our levers. And by the way, it's not just sanctions. It also means confronting the Iranian regime in the region. It also means solidifying our support or reestablishing our support for our traditional Israeli and Arab allies. It also means having a credible military threat. I think it's possible to have an acceptable deal with the Iranian regime, which we all want. We all want diplomacy to resolve this issue. But I fear that the consequence of this deal is going to be war. More turmoil in the region thanks to all the infusion of cash to this regime. And longer term with the nuclear contagion, I fear that chances are greater of a nuclear conflict in the region. So I think the consequence of this deal is war more than the alternative. Conclusion, I would just say again, I think this is a very bipartisan issue. This is too important an issue to let party trump what should be the national interest. And I strongly believe that in the national interest of the United States, Congress needs to reject this deal and frankly reboot our policy towards the Iranian regime. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Makovsky.